We like to think of our ancient relatives as primitive cavemen, grunting, hunched, dragging clubs through muddy forests, barely one step above the animals they hunted. Popular culture has done a remarkable job cementing this image in our collective imagination. And it is almost completely wrong. Because here's the thing. If you transported a Neanderthal into the modern world and put him in a room with the strongest human beings alive today, the elite powerlifters, the professional fighters, the Olympic athletes who dedicate their entire lives to physical performance, that Neanderthal would likely embarrass every single one of them. Not because they were superhuman, but because they were the product of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution in one of the most brutally demanding environments our planet has ever produced. Every gram of muscle, every millimeter of bone, every joint and tendon in a Neanderthal body was optimized by natural selection for raw physical power in a world where the difference between strength and weakness was quite literally the difference between eating and starvation, between surviving and being the thing that something else ate for dinner. So let's talk about what a Neanderthal actually was, physically, anatomically, biomechanically, because the science tells a story that is far more remarkable than anything popular culture has given these people credit for. Built different from the ground up. Before we get into the specifics, we need to establish one thing clearly. Neanderthals were not failed humans. They were not defective, primitive, or inferior versions of us. They were a separate species that had been refining their physical design for somewhere between 400,000 and 800,000 years before they disappeared around 40,000 years ago. During that time, they lived through ice ages, hunted megafauna with thrusting spears at close range, and carved out a viable existence across a vast stretch of Eurasia from Portugal to Siberia. They weren't surviving in spite of their bodies, they were surviving because of them. And those bodies were extraordinary. The average Neanderthal male stood somewhere between 164 and 168 centimeters tall, or roughly 5 feet 5 to 5 feet 6 inches. That might not sound impressive with modern standards, but height is misleading when discussing Neanderthals, because they were built on an entirely different structural blueprint than us. They were stocky, hypermuscular, wide-bodied, and dense in a way that modern humans simply are not. Estimates of Neanderthal body weight for males center around 77 to 83 kilograms, or 170 to 183 pounds, packed onto that compact frame. For comparison, a modern man of similar height typically weighs around 68 to 73 kilograms. Neanderthals were carrying significantly more mass at a shorter height, which means they had a substantially lower center of gravity and a body mass index that would classify most of them as clinically obese by modern medical standards, even though they had minimal body fat. All of that extra weight was muscle and bone. The skeleton of a different kind of human. Let's start where the evidence is clearest, the bones, because bones don't lie. They preserve in rock for tens of thousands of years, and they carry within them a physical record of every demand that was ever placed on the body they once supported. Neanderthal long bones, such as the femur and humerus, feature significantly thicker cortical bone, the dense outer layer that determines bone strength and rigidity. The cortical bone, that hard outer shell of the femur and humerus and tibia, was dramatically thicker in Neanderthals than in modern humans. This isn't a minor difference, it's a fundamental structural distinction that reflects a completely different level of mechanical loading throughout life. Recent genetic analysis of the LRP5 gene, a gene strongly associated with bone mineral density, has revealed that Neanderthals likely had a genetic predisposition toward higher bone mass and strength relative to body size. Modern humans underwent what scientists call postcranial gracilization, a process of becoming more lightly built, lighter boned, less robust compared to archaic populations. We traded structural mass for efficiency. Neanderthals never made that trade. This increased bone density provided the necessary support to withstand the enormous forces generated by powerful muscles and a high-impact lifestyle. Neanderthal individuals also exhibit something that paleontologists get genuinely excited about: exceptionally large and pronounced muscle attachment sites. These are the rough patches, ridges, and bony projections where tendons anchor muscle to skeleton. The bigger and more pronounced these attachment sites, the bigger and more powerful the muscles that connected to them. Neanderthal attachment sites are, in many specimens, at or beyond the range of any modern human ever measured. And then there's the thorax, the chest. Neanderthals had barrel-shaped, capacious rib cages that were dramatically wider and deeper than those of modern humans. This wasn't just about lung capacity, though it contributed to that. It was a biomechanical adaptation. A wider, deeper chest provides a larger base for upper body musculature to anchor against. The muscles of the back, the shoulders, the core all connect to the rib cage and spine. Give those muscles a bigger platform to push against, and you've instantly increased the mechanical potential of every push, pull, swing, and lift they can produce. The arm that science keeps coming back to. When researchers talk about Neanderthal upper body strength, they keep coming back to one particular anatomical signature: extreme asymmetry in the bones of the dominant arm. In many Neanderthal specimens, the bones of the right arm are dramatically larger, denser, and more robust than those of the left. The humeral cortical thickness, the density of the upper arm bone, shows asymmetry far greater than anything seen in modern humans, including professional tennis players, baseball pitchers, and other athletes whose sports drive extreme one-sided development. This asymmetry is the skeletal record of a lifetime of using one arm to generate enormous repetitive forces over and over and over across decades of hunting, tool-making, and daily physical labor. Here's how to think about it. Modern athletes who develop extreme one-arm asymmetry, professional baseball pitchers being the most dramatic example, develop it after years of intense, specialized training. The best of them achieve humeral asymmetry that impresses sports medicine physicians. Neanderthals, with no training program and no specialized sport, show asymmetry that exceeds these athletes. Not because they were training for performance, but because their daily survival required it. Hands that were built for power. Let's zoom in further, all the way to the hands, because the hands are where the interface between Neanderthal strength and the physical world actually happened, and the science here is fascinating. Neanderthal thumbs were better adapted to holding tools with handles, adapted to holding tools in the same way that we hold a hammer. The joint at the base of the Neanderthal thumb was flatter and oriented differently than in modern humans, a configuration that biomechanical analysis reveals was optimized for what scientists call a power squeeze grip. Imagine how you'd grip a hammer handle or the shaft of a thrusting spear. Fingers wrapped around, thumb pressing in from the side, the entire hand generating compressive force. That's a power squeeze grip. And the Neanderthal hand was anatomically specialized for generating maximum force in exactly that configuration. Neanderthals had hands well suited to forceful transverse power grips, as indicated by the greater leverage of their thumbs, enlarged crests for the muscles of finger flexion, and broad fingertips.
Those broad distal phalanges, the bones at the tips of the fingers, increase the contact surface area and improve the distribution of grip force. They make the grip more stable under load. Combined with the enlarged muscle attachment sites running along the finger bones and the thick, robust structure of the palm bones, the Neanderthal hand was essentially engineered by evolution to generate and sustain crushing grip force. Think about what that means in practical terms. Grip strength is one of the best overall predictors of upper body strength in modern humans. Studies consistently show that grip strength correlates with bicep strength, shoulder strength, and overall athletic capability. Now, take that already impressive predictor and amplify it with the broader muscle attachment sites, thicker bones, and power-optimized joint geometry of a Neanderthal hand. The grip strength of a typical adult Neanderthal probably exceeded anything a modern human could generate without pharmaceutical assistance.
The calorie machine. Now let's talk about something that most discussions of Neanderthal strength completely overlook: their metabolism. Because understanding how much fuel a Neanderthal body burned tells us something crucial about how much physical work it was capable of performing. Models of Neanderthal energetics and energy requirements suggest that Neanderthal daily energy expenditure may have reached or exceeded 5,500 calories per day. Some estimates push as high as 6,000 calories per day. For context, a sedentary modern male adult burns around 2,000 to 2,500 calories daily just to keep organ systems running. A Tour de France cyclist, one of the most physically demanding sports humans engage in, burns approximately 5,000 to 9,000 calories per stage day. Neanderthals were maintaining caloric demands comparable to professional endurance athletes just to get through an average day of existing. Why so high? Several reasons stacked on top of each other. First, cold. Neanderthals lived through the Pleistocene ice ages in Eurasia. Maintaining body temperature in cold environments is metabolically expensive. The body burns extra calories just to stay warm, and that cost scales with surface area and temperature differential. Neanderthals evolved certain cold-adapted anatomical features, including their barrel chest and compact limb proportions, specifically to reduce heat loss. But their metabolic cost of thermal regulation was still substantially higher than a modern human in a temperate climate. Second, muscle. Muscle tissue is metabolically expensive. It burns calories just to exist, even at rest. Neanderthals, carrying dramatically more muscle mass than modern humans, had correspondingly higher resting metabolic rates. Their muscles cost more to maintain, even when they weren't doing anything. Third, lifestyle. Hunting large Pleistocene megafauna with thrusting spears, hauling carcasses across rough terrain, moving camp across dozens of kilometers, processing hides and bones with stone tools. All of this added to daily energy expenditure in ways that modern sedentary life simply doesn't replicate. Archaeological evidence from Neumark Nord, Germany, indicates Neanderthals were rendering fat from animal bones about 125,000 years ago, predating similar practices by other early humans by nearly 100,000 years. This process likely helped them meet high caloric needs during periods when carbohydrates were scarce. They were cracking open bones and boiling the fragments to extract every last calorie of marrow fat, not because they were desperate, but because their engines required it. How they actually hunted. Here's where the physical story gets most revealing, because the way Neanderthals hunted tells us everything about the kind of physical confidence and capability they possessed. The results prove the use of a wooden thrusting spear that was impacted with low velocity. This suggests that Neanderthals approached animals very closely and thrusted rather than threw their spears at the animals, most likely from an underhand thrusting angle. Read that again. They were getting close enough to large animals to thrust spears at them from underneath. Not throwing from a safe distance, not using a bow or atlatl to project force from safety. Walking up to a deer, a horse, an aurochs, and stabbing it from close range, in a dense forest environment where the prey could easily turn and strike back. This wasn't a strategy born from technological limitation, it was a strategy born from physical confidence. When you were the strongest, most robust, most physically imposing animal in your weight class in the immediate area, you can afford to hunt that way. Modern predators that hunt via close-range ambush and physical overpowering, lions, tigers, leopards, do so because they have the physical attributes to make it work. Neanderthals had those attributes. The skeletal evidence supports this completely. Neanderthals suffered a high rate of traumatic injury, with an estimated 79 to 94% of specimens showing evidence of healed major trauma, of which 37 to 52% were severely injured, and 13 to 19% injured before reaching adulthood. Let that number sink in. Somewhere between 79 and 94% of Neanderthal skeletons we've found show signs of healed major injuries. Not minor scrapes, major trauma. Broken bones that knitted back together. Deep bruising preserved in the bone structure. Impact damage to skulls and ribs and limbs. The injury pattern is particularly telling. Head and neck injuries dominate the record. And this injury distribution is strikingly similar to one specific group of modern humans, professional rodeo riders, cowboys who make their living getting as close as physically possible to half-ton animals that actively want to hurt them. The comparison was made by paleoanthropologists Thomas Berger and Eric Trinkhaus, and it's apt in ways that go beyond surface similarity. Rodeo riders get hurt the way they do because their sport requires proximity to dangerous animals. Neanderthals got hurt the way they did because their survival strategy required proximity to dangerous animals. The difference is that rodeo riders go home afterward and a helicopter takes the worst injured to a hospital. Neanderthals healed from these injuries in the field, with no antibiotics, no surgery, no pain management beyond whatever plant-based remedies they'd discovered. And then they went back to hunting.
Shanidar 1, the man who should have died. One Neanderthal fossil tells the physical resilience story better than any other. Shanidar 1, discovered in the Shanidar cave in Iraqi Kurdistan, is known informally as Nandi. He was male and, based on bone analysis, he died somewhere in his 40s, which, for a Neanderthal, was genuinely old. And what he endured to reach that age is staggering. Many Neanderthal skeletons have been found with significant injuries, which could have caused paralysis or severely limited their mobility. Shanidar 1 had an amputated right arm, likely lost in adolescence after a broken bone failed to heal properly and was ultimately removed, possibly intentionally as the tissue became infected. He had bone degeneration consistent with osteomyelitis, an infection that ate into his left clavicle. He had a degenerative condition affecting his right leg and foot that gave him an abnormal gait. He showed signs of vision problems in his left eye. He may have had hearing loss. He had arthritis throughout his body. By any modern standard, this man should not have survived past the age of 20. Without antibiotics, without surgical intervention, without physical therapy, Shanidar 1 managed to live to his 40s in one of the most physically demanding environments in human evolutionary history. To survive that long with his injury profile, he must have been cared for by others in his group. He couldn't have hunted. Someone fed him. Someone protected him. Someone carried him when necessary. But he also must have possessed a constitution capable of surviving the infections, the amputations, the bone damage, and the chronic pain that characterized his long life. The physical durability that allowed Neanderthals to heal from the injuries their lifestyle produced wasn't separate from their strength. It was the same adaptation, expressed differently.
where they would fall short. Now, to be fair, because this channel deals in facts rather than pure hype, let's talk about where a Neanderthal wouldn't necessarily have the advantage. Endurance. Neanderthals were probably not as adept at endurance running as modern humans, given the expanded thorax and long heel bones, causing a long moment arm at the Achilles tendon, possibly more conducive for acceleration than distance. Modern humans are, by the standards of the animal kingdom, exceptional endurance runners. Our skeletal proportions, our sweat glands, our upright posture, the way our shoulder girdle can rotate independently of our hips, all of these are adaptations for covering long distances at sustained moderate speeds. Neanderthals were built for power output, not sustained aerobic endurance. Think of the difference between a world-class sprinter and a world-class marathon runner. Both are exceptional athletes, but they're optimized for very different things. Speed over distance was probably not a Neanderthal strong suit. Their compact, heavy bodies and high muscle mass would have made sustained running energetically expensive. They could probably generate impressive short bursts. Their compact, powerful legs would have excelled at explosive acceleration, but chase them for 5 miles, and a modern endurance runner would have the advantage. Intelligence and planning was where modern humans held an edge that ultimately mattered more than any physical attribute. Homo sapiens' long-distance weapon systems, throwing spears, atlatls, and eventually bows, allowed hunting from safe distances. Our larger social networks allowed information sharing across wider geographic regions. Our more flexible cultural adaptations allowed us to exploit a broader range of food sources. But in a direct, physical, close-quarters contest, the energy cost advantage disappears. The equipment advantage disappears. It's just bodies in space applying force. The physics of a Neanderthal hit. Let's actually think through the biomechanics here, because this is where the implications become most concrete. Force equals mass times acceleration. A Neanderthal striking with a fist or weapon would be generating that force from a combination of body mass, muscle cross-sectional area, and the mechanical leverage of their skeletal structure. We've established that Neanderthal body mass was higher than modern humans of similar height. We've established that muscle mass was substantially greater, and we've established that bone density and joint integrity were far superior. That last point matters for an often overlooked reason. When you strike something with maximum force, the limiting factor isn't always the strength of the muscles generating the blow. It's often the structural integrity of the bones and joints transmitting that force. Fracture a knuckle and your punch becomes useless. Dislocate a shoulder and your throw is done. Neanderthal bones and joints were built to transmit forces that would destroy modern human anatomy. They could hit harder not just because their muscles were stronger, but because the structural hardware could handle the forces involved without breaking. Their compact, low center of gravity body also provided exceptional stability. Grappling, wrestling, throwing another body around, all of these activities depend heavily on base stability. A lower center of gravity is a fundamental advantage. Neanderthals were built like granite blocks with legs. Getting them off balance would have required overcoming not just their strength, but their structural efficiency. The grip strength advantage, derived from those power-optimized hand anatomies and those broad, robust finger bones, would have been decisive in any grappling scenario. Once a Neanderthal hand closed around your arm, your leg, your neck, the mechanical forces available to that grip would have been unlike anything modern humans can generate. What they left behind in us. Here's a remarkable final point. Some of us, people of non-African ancestry, carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA in our genomes, the result of interbreeding that occurred when our ancestors first moved out of Africa and into the territories Neanderthals already occupied. Most of the Neanderthal DNA that persisted in the modern human genome relates to immune function and disease resistance. But some of it relates to physical traits, bone density genes, metabolic genes, LRP5 variants that influence skeletal robustness. Some of us are fractionally more like Neanderthals than others. carrying tiny remnants of that extraordinary physical blueprint in our own cells. The Neanderthals are gone. 40,000 years of environmental change, competition, and possibly disease took them from the landscape. But they weren't eliminated because they were weak. They weren't outcompeted because they failed physically. The evidence suggests they were simply out-adapted by a species with different strengths, better suited to the rapidly changing conditions of the late Pleistocene. For 400,000 years, they held Eurasia. They hunted woolly rhinoceros and straight-tusked elephants. They survived ice ages that reshaped continents. They healed from injuries that would be serious medical crises today. They developed culture, art, symbolic behavior, and the capacity to care for their injured and elderly. And they did all of this while maintaining bodies that would stop modern professional athletes cold. The next time someone mentions Neanderthals as a byword for primitive, for dumb, for weak, for anything less than an extraordinarily capable and resilient species, remember what the science actually says. These were not our inferiors. They were our cousins. And in raw physical capability, they were built in ways we will probably never match. If you found this exploration of Neanderthal physical biology genuinely surprising, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the real science behind humanity's deep past. Our ancestors were more extraordinary than the textbooks suggest, and the further back we look, the stranger and more impressive the story gets.